War. War never changes.
You some kind of war junkie?
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Welcome to the War 102 podcast, where we explore the doctrine, theory, philosophy, and history of warfare. I'm your guide, Paul Darling, and I want to share what I learned in nearly 30 years in uniform. So let's get to learning about the most influential activity in human history, war. Welcome to episode 95, The Forgotten Genius of Turenne. I'm not going to lie and tell you I knew all about Turenne prior to this episode. In fact, I had to look it all up. And frankly, if not for him being a French icon, I doubt Napoleon would have mentioned him. But he serves not as some genius at war, but rather as a pragmatic professional. Something we could use more of in our senior officer ranks today. And so with that, let's delve into the history of the royal honored by the revolutionaries. In the turbulent landscape of 17th century Europe, you had religious strife, you got some dynastic ambitions, and shifting alliances, which defined warfare of the age. And few figures embodied the evolution of the military art as profoundly as Henri de la Tour d'Avon, Vicomte de Turenne, henceforth known as Turenne. Born in 1611 into a noble Huguenot family in Sedan, Turenne entered a world where armies were often patchwork coalitions of mercenaries, and battles frequently devolved into sieges or attritional slogs. His career, spanning 5 decades, bridged the 30-Year War and the grand conflicts of Louis XIV's reign, transforming him from a promising young officer into one of history's most admired commanders. Napoleon, as mentioned, would rank him among the greatest captains of all time. Turenne's genius lay not in reckless charges or overwhelming force, but in a calculated blend of maneuver, logistics, combined arms, and psychological insight. He understood war as a science of positioning and timing, where the destruction of the enemy's will and supply lines would often prove more decisive than any clash of infantry. Early influences from his service in the Dutch army under his uncle, Maurice of Nassau, instilled a respect for discipline, siegecraft, and the careful integration of infantry, cavalry, and artillery. As he rose through French ranks, Turenne refined these lessons amid the devastated battlefields of Germany and the Low Countries, developing strategies that emphasize mobility over static defense and adaptability over rigid doctrine. His tactics evolved from bold assaults in youth to masterful campaigns of feint and countermarch in maturity, always prioritizing the preservation of his army while forcing opponents into disadvantageous positions. From the Rhine frontiers to the dunes of Flanders, the winter marches in Alsace, his methods demonstrated a grasp of terrain, supply, and the human elements of command. In an era when generals often sought glory through bloody frontal attacks, Turenne's preference for maneuver warfare prefigured modern operational art, making him a pivotal figure in the transition from Renaissance armies to the professional forces of the Enlightenment. Turenne's early career provided the forge for his later mastery. Entering Dutch service as a teenager, he participated in the grueling sieges of the 80 Years' War, learning the value of methodical engineering and the perils of overextension. By the 1630s, as France openly joined the anti-Habsburg coalition in the 30 Years' War, he transferred to French command. His first notable actions came on the Rhine, where he distinguished himself in retreats and assaults under challenging conditions. In 1636, during operations near Saverne, a musket ball wounded him, but he pressed the attack, earning rapid promotion to Maréchal de Camp. The capture of Bressac in 1638 marked his emergence as a commander of some note. Besieging the key fortress on the Rhine, Turenne coordinated a daring assault that overcame strong defenses and earned the admiration of Allied German troops. His success stemmed from meticulous preparation, integrating artillery to breach the walls, infantry for storming parties, and maintaining supply lines despite enemy harassment. This operation highlighted his emerging strategic principle, securing vital choke points to control movement and resources rather than chasing decisive battles prematurely. Campaigns in Italy further honed his skills. In 1640, he played a central role in the siege and capture of Turenne, demonstrating proficiency in the combined arms operations, coordinating French forces with local allies. Turenne employed feints to draw defenders away from weak points, then struck with concentrated artillery and infantry assaults. These experiences taught him the importance of intelligence, rapid adaptation to terrain, and the psychological impact of swift victories. By 1643, with France's entry into open war against the Habsburgs fully underway, Turenne received promotion to Marshal of France, a testament to his growing reputation. The command of the Army of Germany in late 1643 tested these foundations. Turenne inherited a shattered force of roughly 10,000 men, primarily German mercenaries loyal to the memory of Bernhard of Saxe-Weimar, scattered after defeats in the Black Forest. The Rhineland lay devastated by years of foraging armies, rendering traditional supply impossible. Facing superior Bavarian and imperial forces under capable commanders like Franz von Mercy, Turenne adopted a strategy of calculated caution. He recognized that direct confrontation risked annihilation. Instead, he focused on rebuilding cohesion, securing forage by deep marches into enemy territory and awaiting reinforcements. This period exemplified Turenne's logistical acumen. In an age when armies often dissolved from hunger or desertions, he emphasized disciplined foraging parties, protected supply convoys, and the welfare of troops. His men respected him for sharing hardships, which fostered loyalty essential for sustained operations. Strategically, Turenne understood the campaign as a contest of endurance and positioning. Control the Rhine towns, deny the enemy winter quarters, and force them to disperse. The 1644 campaign around Freiburg illustrated his tactical evolution. When Bavarians seized the city, Turenne appealed for aid and linked with the Duc d'Enghien, the future Great Condé, who assumed overall command due to royal precedence. Together, they commanded about 20,000 men against Mercy's entrenched positions on wooded heights and earthworks. Over 3 days in August, the French launched assaults on fortified lines. Turenne orchestrated flanking maneuvers through difficult terrain, such as a march via Wittenau to strike the Bavarian rear at Mershausen, while Enghien pressed frontal attacks. The battles were costly, with French forces suffering heavy casualties in repeated charges against prepared defenses. Yet Turenne's coordination, artillery preparation, infantry advances supported by cavalry screens, and exploitation of gaps compelled Mercy to abandon Freiburg. The French then secured Philipsburg and Rhine towns northward to Bingen. Tactically, Turenne favored envelopment over attrition, using terrain to mask movements and cavalry for pursuit. Strategically, the victory opened the Middle Rhine, demonstrating how inferior numbers could prevail through superior maneuver and joint command. Subsequent years saw Turenne refine these methods against another foe. In 1645, after setbacks like Mergenheim, he regrouped and linked with Swedish allies. His campaigns into Bavaria involved bold advances, ravaging enemy lands to deny resources while protecting his own lines. The 1648 Battle of Zusmarshausen, fought in concert with Swedish forces, proved decisive. Turenne's army, augmented by allies, executed a coordinated attack that shattered imperial and Bavarian remnants, forcing the Elector of Bavaria to sue for peace and paving the way for the Treaty of Westphalia. Here, his strategy of attrition through maneuver, harassing supply, isolating detachments, and striking only when the enemy was divided, reached maturity. Throughout the 30 Years' War, Turenne's tactics emphasized flexibility. He integrated the various arms effectively. He avoided winter quarters when possible, preferring instead to launch surprise marches to disrupt enemy plans. His wolf strategy of deep incursions into forage-rich areas sustained operations in otherwise barren regions. Psychologically, he cultivated an image of prudent boldness, inspiring confidence while sowing doubts in opponents. The Fronde civil wars from 1648 to 1653 thrust Turenne into a more complex arena, now having to blend both his military skill with political navigation. Initially aligning with noble rebels due to perceived slights and family ties, he commanded anti-royal forces. Yet loyalty to the crown and pragmatic assessment of the monarchy's resilience prompted his return in 1651. This shift required some delicate maneuvering, both literally and figuratively. As royal commander, Turenne faced Condé's rebel army, bolstered by Spanish support. With limited resources, he still conducted a masterful defensive campaign. In 1652, actions around the Loire and Paris showcased his ability to operate with small forces. At Blenheim, he rescued a defeated colleague and checked Condé's advance through timely counterattacks. Near Paris, at the Faubourg Saint-Antoine, his positioning prevented rebel breakthroughs while protecting the royal court. He blocked key bridges and used urban terrain for ambushes. The 1652-53 campaign was perhaps his finest service to the monarchy. Outnumbered and facing the charismatic rival in Condé, Turenne employed Fabian tactics, avoiding decisive engagement, harassing supply lines, and forcing the enemy to overextend. He kept the regent and young Louis XIV from fleeing far from the capital, maintaining their political legitimacy. His small army's endurance relied on precise logistics, rapid marches to fertile areas, disciplined pillage, and morale maintenance through personal example. By 1653, these efforts exhausted the rebels, allowing royal forces to reoccupy Paris and suppressing the uprising. Turenne's strategy here highlighted restraint, using maneuver to win without unnecessary bloodshed, preserving forces for the larger war against Spain. With the Fronde quelled, Turenne turned to the ongoing Franco-Spanish War. Spanish tercios, though declining, remained formidable in the Low Countries. French strategy aimed at securing Flanders and breaking Spanish power. Turenne's operations from 1654 onward combined siegecraft with field maneuvers. The relief of Arras in 1654 involved storming enemy trenches in coordinated assaults, expelling besiegers through superior numbers and aggressive engineering. The pinnacle came in 1658 at the Battle of the Dunes near Dunkirk. Allied with English forces under Cromwell, Turenne commanded an Anglo-French army against a Spanish force, including Condé's exiled troops. The Spanish position on dunes and beaches, a challenging terrain of sand and tides. Turenne's genius shone in exploiting these conditions. He timed the advance for low tide, allowing infantry and cavalry to maneuver along the beach and outflank the enemy's right. English redcoats advanced steadily in the center, while French cavalry under leaders like Crocquet charged the flanks. The battle unfolded with precise timing. Artillery softened positions, infantry pressed forward in lines, and cavalry exploited breakthroughs. The Spanish, caught between tides and attacks, collapsed. Turenne's use of terrain, turning the beach into an avenue of approach, neutralized Spanish defensive advantages. Combined arms integration proved decisive. English discipline anchored the line. French mobility delivered the coup. Victory enabled the capture of Dunkirk, which was then handed to England, and advances into Flanders, threatening Ghent and Brussels. This success contributed directly to the 1659 Peace of the Pyrenees, ending the long war on favorable terms for the French. In the dunes, Turenne demonstrated mature tactics, meticulous reconnaissance, and exploiting of natural phenomena, the orchestration of multinational forces. His strategy prioritized decisive engagement only when conditions favored overwhelming success, blending offense with calculated risk. The accession of Louis XIV brought Turenne new honors and responsibilities. Now appointed Marshal General of the King's camps and armies in 1660, he oversaw army reforms, emphasizing professionalism, training, and supply systems. In the War of Devolution from 1667 to 1668, he co-commanded with the king in the Spanish Netherlands, conducting rapid sieges and maneuvers that secured territorial gains with minimal bloodshed. His approach favored investment in blockade over costly assaults, using superior French artillery and engineering to compel surrender. The Franco-Dutch War from 1672 to 1678 witnessed Turenne's strategic apex on the German front. Facing a coalition including the Emperor, Brandenburg, and other princes, he defended the Rhine with limited forces against far superior numbers. In 1672, he executed the brilliant maneuvers across Westphalia, invading Brandenburg territories and forcing the Elector Frederick William to negotiate. These operations now relied on speed, surprise, and cavalry heavy for raiding and disruptions. The 1674 campaign intensified the challenge. After ravaging the Palatinate to deny resources, Turenne confronted a massive imperial army under Montecuccoli and allies, totaling over 50,000. At Sinsheim, he defeated a detachment corps through aggressive flanking. At Ensheim, he launched a powerful assault, but withdrew strategically before overcommitting, preserving his army. As winter approached and the Allies occupied Alsace, Turenne conceived his most famous operation, the winter campaign of 1674 through 75. Defying convention that armies hibernated, he marched south along the French side of the Vosges Mountains in harsh conditions, reappearing unexpectedly near Belfort. This turning movement outflanked the enemy, who assumed the passes impassable. On January 5, 1675, at Turckheim, Turenne struck the Allied right flank near the village. Using Turenne for cover, he massed infantry and artillery to roll up the line, while cavalry prevented reinforcements. The attack exploited the Allies' extended positions and supply vulnerabilities, forcing the retreat across the Rhine and saving Alsace. This campaign epitomized Turenne's strategic mastery. Maneuver warfare reached its height, deception through false retreats, winter mobility to achieve surprise, precise intelligence on enemy dispositions, and a flank attack that negated the enemy's numerical superiority. Logistically, he maintained army cohesion through pre-positioned supplies and disciplined foraging. Tactically, combined arms, with infantry holding, artillery bombarding, and cavalry exploiting, delivered a low-casualty victory that shattered the coalition. In spring of 1675, Turenne faced Montecuccoli again in a duel of masters. Through intricate maneuvers along the Rhine, he compelled the imperial commander towards battle on disadvantageous ground near Salzbach. On July 27th, as armies engaged in artillery exchange, Turenne inspected a battery. a cannonball struck him fatally, ending his life at 63. The French, demoralized, withdrew, but his final campaign had already secured the strategic gains. Turenne's death elicited profound mourning across France. Buried with royal honors, his legacy endured. His strategies emphasized the operational art, campaigns as integrated sequences of marches, feints, and selective engagements, aimed at positioning rather than attrition alone. He pioneered reliance on professional forces, meticulous staff work, though, compared to today, not so much, and troops' welfare to sustain prolonged operations. And tactically, Turenne advanced beyond the era's norms. He favored the linear infantry formations with platoon firing for sustained volleys, cavalry in deeper squadrons for charges, and mobile artillery. Turenne was always his ally. Rivers for barriers, mountains for cover, plains for cavalry, and logistics formed the backbone. He calculated marches by forage availability, protected his trains, and minimized camp disease through hygiene. He led by example, sharing risks yet counseling caution, inspiring devotion. He avoided battle when outnumbered unless train or surprise compensated, preferring to win without fighting through superior positioning. His winter marches and flank operations prefigured Napoleonic corps maneuvers and modern blitzkrieg principles of speed and indirect approach. Across his career, Turenne adopted to evolving warfare. Early reliance on mercenaries gave way to royal armies with better discipline. Alliances required diplomatic finesse alongside military command. Military thinkers studied his campaigns for lessons in maneuver, supply, and command. Ultimately, Turenne proved that intellect and preparation could triumph over brute force.
Thanks for listening today. If you want to help the show, please share today's episode on any social media sites you can. Check out the War 102 Buzzsprout website for more information and to send me a message. And, of course, my thanks to the subscribers who help keep the show going. Hope you all join me next week. See you soon.